The rain hadn't stopped in hours. It tapped relentlessly against the smudged diner windows, drumming a slow, hollow rhythm like a heartbeat waiting to falter. Outside, Chicago's skyline shimmered beneath the storm's veil, neon signs flickering in defiance of the downpour. But inside the diner, an aging relic tucked between forgotten brick buildings, time had slowed to a crawl. Lena Carter stood behind the counter, her hands red from scrubbing and her eyes heavy with the fatigue of a long day. She had been on her feet since sunset, waiting tables for strangers who barely looked at her, refilling coffee cups for tips that wouldn't even cover the bus ride home. Her apron smelled of grease and coffee grounds, her back ached, and the clock's ticking seemed louder than her thoughts. She exhaled slowly and leaned against the counter, watching her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine. 26 years old and still stuck in the same job she'd taken to survive. Still clinging to dreams her mother once had for her, dreams now buried beneath bills, night shifts, and the relentless silence of a life that had given her so little. The bell above the door jingled. It startled her. The diner had been empty for nearly an hour, and only the storm had kept her company. She turned toward the door with the detached politeness of someone too tired to care. Then her breath caught. A man stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit that whispered money and power. His coat was dark, his shoes spotless despite the rain, and everything about him, his posture, his silence, the unreadable calm in his expression, radiated control. He didn't belong here. Not in this neighborhood. Not in this diner. And yet, he walked in as if he'd been here 100 times before. Without a word, he slid into a booth in the far corner. The cracked red vinyl sighed beneath his weight. Lena hesitated. Something about him, it wasn't just the way he looked. It was the way the air changed around him. Like he'd brought the storm inside with him. She grabbed a menu and approached, smoothing her voice into its usual neutral register. "Welcome in. Can I get you something to drink?" The man glanced up. His eyes were blue. Cold, distant, and razor-sharp. But there was something buried deep behind them. A flicker. Something wounded. Something that didn't match the rest of him. "Coffee." "Black," he said. Lena nodded and turned toward the counter, willing her hands to stop shaking. She poured the coffee, her thoughts tangled with questions she couldn't name. When she brought it to him, he was already pulling out his wallet to pay. The leather was expensive, almost brand new, except for a fraying corner at the fold. That's when it happened. The wallet slipped from his hand. It fell open as it hit the table, and for a second, just a second, Lena saw what was inside. A photograph. Small, old, faded with time. Her world tilted. She reached out before she even knew she was moving. Her fingers hovered over the image, eyes wide, lungs frozen. It was her mother. There was no mistake. That smile, gentle, quietly radiant, had been Lena's guiding star since she was a child. That exact photograph had once sat on their mantel. She had memorized every crease, every freckle, every strand of her mother's hair in that picture. Her voice broke when she spoke. Where did you get this?" The man blinked. Then, with a smooth motion, he closed the wallet and slipped it back into his coat. "You must be mistaken," he said flatly. Lena took a step back, as if the words had slapped her. "No. That's my mother. Isabel Carter. That picture, you have no right to have it." He rose to his feet. Without missing a beat, he placed $100 bill on the table. "Keep the change," he said, like nothing had happened. And then he turned to leave. "No, wait." Lena's voice cracked, desperation chasing him through the door. She rushed from behind the counter, nearly slipping on the wet floor. "You can't just walk away. Tell me how you knew her." He paused. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to go silent. He turned, slowly, and looked at her. That flicker was back in his eyes. This time she saw it more clearly, regret, maybe even recognition. It passed too quickly. "I don't owe you an explanation," he said. And then he was gone. Lena stood frozen by the door, staring at the spot where he had disappeared into the night. The black sedan waiting outside swallowed him whole, and the taillights vanished into the rain. Her heart was pounding. Not just with confusion or fear, but with something deeper. Something primal. Like a part of her past had been ripped open in front of her and left bleeding on the diner floor. Back inside, the silence was deafening. Marvin, the night cook, poked his head from the kitchen. "Lena? Everything all right?" She didn't answer. Her legs moved on instinct, carrying her to the break room. She shut the door behind her and leaned against the metal shelves, her breath shallow. The rain beat against the rooftop, echoing her pulse. How did a billionaire, someone she'd never met, have the one photograph that had meant everything to her? She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and opened the photo gallery. There it was, her copy. Same photo. Same lighting. Same angle. What in God's name was happening? She opened her wallet and pulled out the physical version, creased and taped at the corner. She placed it side by side with the image now etched in her mind. There was no doubt. The man had her mother's photo. And he had lied. She sat down hard on the break room bench, overwhelmed. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Was he a collector? An old friend? Someone who once loved her mother? Or something worse? Her fingers hovered over her phone's browser. She didn't know his name, but she would find it. She had to. Whoever he was, whatever he knew about her mother, he had opened a door she hadn't known existed. And she wasn't going to let it close. Not until she found the truth. Not until she knew what secret had been buried for all these years, right under her feet. Because in his eyes, in that one look, Lena saw the storm had only just begun. Lena didn't sleep that night. She sat in her dark apartment, knees pulled up to her chest on the worn-out couch, watching the city lights blink through the rain-streaked window. The $100 bill he had left sat on her coffee table like a curse, not a tip. She hadn't touched it. Couldn't. Instead, she stared at it, her mind reeling. Julian Blackwood. She didn't know his name yet, but his face was burned into her memory. His voice, his eyes, the ice-cold dismissal. And, of course, the photograph. Her mother's face, resting inside a stranger's wallet, as if it belonged there. Why? Why did a billionaire, someone who looked like he hadn't stepped foot outside of a boardroom in years, have a picture of Isabel Carter, a nurse from the south side of Chicago who had died 5 years ago in a small apartment with more unpaid bills than friends at her funeral? Lena's thumb hovered over her phone screen. She had taken a mental snapshot of his face. The cut of his suit. The way his nameplate on the credit card had glimmered in the soft light of the diner. She remembered the initials, JB. It wasn't much. But it was enough. She opened a search engine and began typing, Chicago business tycoons. Real estate. Male. Initials JB. The results were overwhelming. She narrowed it down. She focused on photos. Cross-checked articles. Looked up luxury real estate firms based in Chicago. And then she saw him. The same piercing gaze. The same chiseled features. The same expensive suit, this time captured in a magazine photo next to a mayor and 2 tech CEOs. Julian Blackwood. Founder and CEO of Blackwood Industries. Billionaire. Visionary. Known for converting decaying neighborhoods into luxury condos. Revered in high society. Untouchable. Lena stared at the screen as a chill ran down her spine. What possible connection could he have had to her mother? Their worlds weren't just different, they were built on opposite ends of the universe. One stood on penthouse rooftops, the other worked double shifts in worn white sneakers and came home with aching knees. The clock on her wall ticked past 3 a.m., but Lena didn't feel tired. She felt alive. Terrified, but alive. Like something had broken open inside her, a vault that had never been meant to be touched. By sunrise, she had made her decision. She wasn't going to wait for fate to bring the answers to her door. She had already spent too many years wondering who her father was, why her mother had always gone quiet when the question came up, why there had always been this hollow ache in her chest when she saw other girls at school with someone waiting to pick them up after class. This wasn't just about the photo anymore. It was about a story that had been denied to her. A past that had been buried. And she was done being left in the dark. By 7 a.m., Lena was on the first bus downtown. She sat by the window, wearing her cleanest shirt and a blazer that didn't quite fit. Her hair was pulled into a knot at the base of her neck. The same wallet that held the photo of her mother rested heavy in her bag, like a weight pulling her forward. The Willis Tower pierced the sky like a needle, shining against the soft morning haze. As the bus approached, Lena's heart thudded harder. She had never stepped foot inside the tower before. It was a symbol of everything she wasn't: wealth, status, security. But now, it was also where her questions might find a voice. The lobby of Blackwood Industries was everything she expected: cold, grand, beautiful. Glass and marble, polished to perfection. A massive digital screen played a promotional video on loop: Blackwood Industries, reviving cities, building futures. She approached the reception desk. The woman seated there was immaculate, dressed in a tailored navy suit with a name badge that sparkled under the lobby lights. Her smile was practiced, pleasant but distant. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked. Lena tried to steady her voice. "No. But I need to speak to Mr. Blackwood. It's personal." "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood's schedule is fully booked. If you'd like to leave your contact." "I can't. It's urgent." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "It's about my mother." The receptionist paused but didn't falter. "Mr. Blackwood does not take unannounced visitors. You can submit an inquiry through our corporate website." Lena felt the steel doors of power closing around her. She looked around the lobby, searching for a crack in the armor. That's when she saw him. A young man, maybe in his 20s, hurrying past with a coffee tray and a tablet under his arm. His ID badge swung from his neck, and he looked like he hadn't slept. Perfect. Lena stepped in beside him just as he neared the security gate. "Hey, you forgot the legal drafts Mr. Blackwood wanted signed this morning." The man blinked at her, confused. "Wait, what?" She didn't give him time to finish. She walked with purpose, staying close enough to pass through the security gate just as he scanned his badge. The guard barely glanced up. The moment the elevator doors closed behind her, Lena let out the breath she'd been holding. "What the hell am I doing? Too late to back out now." She pressed the top floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world. The office was sleek and silent, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Assistants moved quietly behind glass walls. Phones didn't ring here, they buzzed discreetly. No one raised their voice. She walked past the front desks, feeling the heat of eyes on her. And then, "Excuse me, miss?" A tall man in a tailored black suit stepped into her path. His eyes narrowed. "Can I help you?" Lena swallowed. "I need to see Julian Blackwood. It's about my mother." The man didn't blink. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But I'm not leaving until I talk to him." There was a pause. Then, finally, he sighed. "Wait here." She waited. Seconds dragged into minutes. The silence on this floor was oppressive, filled with unspoken judgment. Her palms were sweating. And then, the door at the far end of the hallway opened. Julian Blackwood stepped out. He looked different in the daylight, less polished, more real. There were lines beneath his eyes, and he moved slower than the image she had memorized from magazine covers. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he broke the silence. "You just don't give up, do you?" "Not when it comes to my mother," Lena said. He studied her for a beat longer, then turned. "Come with me." His office was enormous, but she barely noticed the view or the decor. All her attention was fixed on the man in front of her, the man who might hold the key to everything she had never been told. He sat on the edge of his desk and folded his arms. "You saw the picture." "I saw my mother," Lena said, voice shaking. "And I want to know why you have it." Julian was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. He opened it, and once again, revealed the photograph. "I've carried this for over 20 years, he said. "She gave it to me the last time I saw her." Lena's breath caught. Julian looked down at the photo like it was a wound. "Your mother. Isabel, she wasn't just a memory to me. She was everything." Lena didn't understand. Couldn't. Not yet. But she knew, deep in her bones, that the truth was about to unravel. And nothing would ever be the same. The silence in Julian Blackwood's office felt like a vacuum. Lena sat across from him, her spine rigid, eyes locked on the photograph he had just placed between them. Her mother's face stared back at her, radiant, timeless, and familiar in a way that made Lena's chest ache. But what unsettled her more was the way Julian looked at it, not like a collector of memories, but like a man who had never let go of the past. "Where was this taken?" she asked, her voice uneven. "Paris," he said softly. "A long time ago." Lena blinked. Paris. The word felt foreign and distant, like something from a life that belonged to someone else. Her mother had never mentioned it. Not once. Isabel Carter, practical and quiet, had never spoken about international travels or whirlwind romances. She had kept her life small, grounded, focused on Lena and her job at the local clinic. But now, as Julian leaned back slightly and folded his arms, Lena realized her mother had lived an entirely different life before she was born, one that she had deliberately hidden. Julian's eyes didn't leave the photograph. "I was 23, he began. Fresh out of university, arrogant, ambitious, broke. I had this idea I could change the world with real estate. My professors thought I was delusional. But your mother, she didn't." Lena tried to imagine it. Her mother, younger, standing in the middle of a Paris street with this man by her side. It didn't make sense. Not because she couldn't see it, but because she couldn't understand why Isabel had kept it locked away so deeply. Julian continued. "We met by accident. A late train, a crowded station. I was late for a job interview, she had just finished a shift at a nearby clinic. I offered her a cab and she laughed at me. Said she didn't trust men in suits." He smiled faintly, but it was tinged with sorrow. "But she took the cab anyway. We ended up talking for hours." His voice faltered. "We were in love. Completely. Recklessly. She was strong, brilliant, stubborn. She didn't care about money or power. She cared about people, about doing something that mattered. I had never met anyone like her." Lena swallowed. There was something about the way he said her name, Isabel, that made Lena feel like she was hearing a different version of her mother. Not the nurse who worked overtime and came home too tired to eat, but a woman who once believed in possibility. "But you left," Lena said. "Didn't you?" Julian nodded, slowly. "I did. I thought I had to. My family, Blackwoods, don't marry nurses. That's what they told me. They said if I stayed with her, I'd lose everything. The funding, the business connections, my inheritance. I was scared. So I walked away. The confession landed like a punch. I thought I could come back later, he said, his voice hoarse. Once I was established. Once I had something real to offer her. But when I went back to Paris, she was gone. She left no forwarding address. No trace. I spent years trying to find her. Lena felt like the ground beneath her had shifted. And you never did? Not until last night, Julian said. Not until I saw you. Her breath caught in her throat. Me? He reached into a drawer and pulled out something else, an envelope. A little aged, slightly crumpled. I kept this, he said. For years. It was returned to me unopened. Lena took it carefully, her fingers trembling. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her mother's. Inside was a single letter, never sent. Dated shortly after Lena's birth. Julian. You made your choice. I won't beg you to reconsider. But you should know, I'm not alone anymore. I'm carrying your daughter. She will never know what it's like to be abandoned by someone who claimed to love her. She will grow up with dignity. She will never ask where her father is, because I will teach her that her worth is not dependent on your presence. Goodbye. The words blurred in Lena's vision. She blinked hard, holding the letter with both hands like it might fall apart. Julian's voice was barely audible. I didn't know. I swear to you. If I had known. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Lena sat in silence, the weight of the truth settling over her like snowfall, quiet, suffocating, irreversible. All this time. All the birthdays. All the school plays. All the nights she sat alone in her room wondering why her mother always changed the subject when fathers came up in conversation. This was the reason. This silence. Why didn't she tell me? Lena asked, almost to herself. Julian's voice was soft. I think, she was protecting you. From me. From the man I was back then. And who are you now? She asked. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw the pain behind them clearly. I'm someone who has everything, and yet somehow managed to lose the only two people who ever truly mattered. Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. The man in front of her wasn't the monster she had imagined. He wasn't innocent either. He was human. Flawed, broken, and trying to pick up the pieces of a life he had shattered with his own hands. She looked down at the letter again. Then at the photo. She used to sing to me, she said quietly. At night, when I couldn't sleep. There was this lullaby, and I never knew where it came from. It sounded different. Not something she learned from a children's book. It always felt like it came from a memory. Julian leaned forward, a tear sliding down the edge of his face. It was French. She sang it to me too. The night before I left. Silence fell again, but it was different now. Not empty, but heavy with the beginnings of something new. You said you loved her, Lena whispered. I still do, Julian replied. They sat like that for a long time. Two strangers bound by a single woman. A mother. A lover. A mystery. And now, a bridge. Lena stood, unsure of what to do with the whirlwind inside her. I need time. Take all you need, Julian said, rising to meet her. But as she turned to leave, he called after her. Lena. She stopped. I know I don't deserve your trust. But if there's anything I can give you now, anything you want to know, I'll tell you. No more silence. She nodded once, then stepped out into the corridor. The city outside gleamed like it had just been washed clean by the storm. But for Lena Carter, the real storm was just beginning to clear. Lena stared out the train window as the city slipped behind her. Buildings blurred into trees, and streets gave way to long, open roads that led into the quiet outskirts of Wisconsin. The invitation had arrived in the form of a handwritten note, penned in Julian's distinct, careful hand. "If you're willing. There are things I need you to see. Come when you're ready." And now, here she was, heart pounding in her chest, unsure if what waited for her at the end of this journey would bring healing or more scars. Lake Geneva shimmered in the late afternoon light. The air was cleaner here, thinner somehow, carrying with it the scent of pine and the faint rustle of water brushing gently against the shore. The Blackwood estate was perched at the edge of the lake like something out of a painting, an elegant, stone-front mansion with wide terraces and large windows that reflected the sky. It should have felt intimidating, but Lena wasn't here to be impressed. Julian met her at the front steps. He wasn't in a suit today. Instead, he wore a simple sweater and slacks. The change in attire didn't make him any less formidable, but there was something more human in it, less armor, more truth. "Thank you for coming," he said as she stepped out of the car. She gave a short nod. "I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you." He gestured for her to follow, and they walked side by side through the manicured grounds, the sound of gravel crunching beneath their feet. Neither spoke. The silence stretched until they reached the edge of the woods behind the estate. There, nestled between tall pines, was a narrow footpath. Julian paused. "There's a place I want to show you. It belonged to your mother. To us." Lena followed him without answering, the path winding through trees until it opened to a small clearing. A rustic wooden cabin stood at the center, weathered but sturdy. It looked untouched by time, as if it had waited patiently for this moment to come back to life. "She loved it here," Julian said. "This is where we stayed, the last time we were together. I never brought anyone else. I never changed anything." They stepped inside, and Lena was immediately struck by the stillness. Dust floated in the golden shafts of light from the windows. There was a simple bed, a desk, and shelves filled with old books. Everything was preserved like a secret kept just for her. Julian walked to a small trunk in the corner and opened it slowly. Inside were stacks of letters, a few photographs, and a delicate jewelry box. He handed her a photo from the top of the pile. Lena stared down at it, heart tightening. Her mother, young, smiling, stood with Julian in front of the Eiffel Tower. They looked happy. Whole. A kind of joy Lena had never seen in her mother's eyes during her lifetime. "She carried that smile for you," Julian said gently. "But I think part of her heart stayed here, in this life she left behind." Lena placed the photo down. "She never told me about this place. About you. She kept everything buried." "Because I broke her," Julian said, voice gravelly. "She had every right to disappear." Lena turned to face him. "Why did you bring me here?" "Because I want you to see the truth, not just hear it. This cabin, this land, the ring I kept, it wasn't about ownership. It was about holding on to the only time in my life that ever made sense." He opened the jewelry box and took out a silver ring, tarnished, but beautiful. Inside the band, she saw the engraving, J and I. Always. I gave this to her the night I left. I told her I'd come back. And I meant it. But I let fear speak louder than love. Lena didn't answer. Her throat was too tight. She walked slowly around the cabin, letting her fingers trail across the wooden desk, the corners of old books, the windowsill where sunlight warmed the space. She could feel her mother here. Not in some ghostly sense, but in the quiet tenderness that lingered in the details, flowers pressed into a notebook, a scarf still hanging from a hook, the faint scent of lavender in the air. "She wasn't just trying to protect me," Lena said suddenly. "She was protecting herself. From the pain of being forgotten." From the hope that maybe you'd come back one day and remember what you left behind. Julian's expression tightened. And I did remember. Every damn day. But you didn't come. He looked at her with hollow eyes. I was too late. The words hit them both with a finality neither had prepared for. She died alone, Lena said. In a small apartment. No flowers. No visits. Just me, a pile of unpaid medical bills, and silence. Julian took a step forward, his voice cracking. I didn't know she was sick. I would've. It's not about what you would have done, Lena interrupted, tears slipping down her cheeks. It's about what you didn't do. And now she's gone, and she'll never know that you finally remembered her. Julian didn't try to defend himself. He simply looked down, defeated. Lena wiped her tears and took a breath. So where does that leave us? He hesitated. Wherever you want it to. She looked at him, really looked at him. Not as the billionaire, not as the powerful stranger who had turned her world upside down, but as the man who had once loved a woman so fiercely that he still carried her photograph 20 years later. There was sorrow in him, yes. Regret. Shame. But there was also love, something broken and unfinished, waiting to be seen. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said. I don't expect that, he replied. But I want to try. To be present. To make things right, not with money, not with grand gestures, but with truth. And time. They stood in the fading light of the cabin, the sun casting long shadows across the floor. I spent my whole life wondering why my mother never talked about the past, Lena said. Now I know. It wasn't just pain. It was love, buried so deep it almost disappeared. Julian walked to a drawer and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. She left this here. Told me to give it to you if the time ever came. Lena opened it slowly. Inside was a folded note, written in her mother's script. Lena. If you're reading this, then maybe the silence has finally broken. You were always the light of my life. I never wanted you to grow up with half-truths, but I also didn't want you to carry the weight of a man's absence. Know this, you were never unwanted. You were born of love, even if that love was tested. If he's there now, it means he's chosen to face the past. That means something. And maybe, just maybe, it can mean something for you too. Lena held the letter to her chest, her shoulders shaking. The truth hadn't freed her, but it had illuminated a path forward, uneven, uncertain, but real. She looked at Julian one last time. I don't want a father who shows up 26 years late. But I might be willing to know the man who loved my mother, and regrets leaving her. He nodded, the weight of that possibility filling his eyes with hope, and fear. Outside, the lake rippled in the soft wind, carrying with it a whisper of something new. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The sky over Chicago that morning was pale and cloudless, the kind of clean slate the city rarely offered. Lena Carter stood at the steps of a building that hadn't existed 6 months ago. Now it towered proudly at the corner of two once-forgotten streets on the south side, sunlight glinting off the silver letters engraved above the entrance. The Isabel Carter Community Center. The crowd gathered outside was modest but meaningful, local families, non-profit leaders, a few reporters, and several women who had once worked alongside her mother in that tiny, overburdened clinic. For many of them, Isabel Carter had been a quiet force of healing and hope. And today, they were here to honor the woman whose story had remained in the shadows far too long. Lena stood behind the podium, a small stack of notes shaking slightly in her hands. She hadn't planned to speak. She'd told Julian she wasn't sure she had the words for a moment like this. But now, looking at the faces in the crowd and the warm gold ribbon waiting to be cut, she felt something rise in her, a voice she didn't know she had. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice steady but tender. This building isn't just brick and glass. It's a promise. A second chance. A name restored. She paused, glancing at the framed photo of her mother on the easel beside her. My mother believed in giving more than she had. She believed in showing up even when she was tired, in helping even when no one said thank you. But she also believed in healing, not just bodies, but hearts. Lena swallowed hard, her next word slower, more deliberate. For a long time, I believed I knew everything about my mother. I didn't. And that gap between what we know and what we don't, it can change you. There was a long breath. But it can also open a door. A door to compassion. To truth. To forgiveness. When she stepped down from the podium, the crowd broke into gentle applause. And though she smiled, her eyes instinctively searched the crowd for the man standing at the back, just behind the last row of folding chairs. Julian Blackwood stood with his hands in his pockets, wearing the same calm expression he had the first day she met him in the diner, but it meant something entirely different now. There was no armor in it. No distance. Only presence. He didn't speak when she reached him. He simply held out a small, velvet box. Lena hesitated for a moment before accepting it. Inside was a silver necklace, delicate, modest, and familiar. When she turned over the pendant, she read the words engraved on it, the same ones her mother had once scribbled into a page of an old journal. Forgive. Love. Begin. Her throat tightened, but she managed a whisper. She gave this to you. She left it with me years ago, Julian said. She told me to pass it on when the time was right. I didn't understand what she meant back then. But I think I do now. Lena closed the box slowly, then looked up at him. I'm still angry. I know, he said. I don't trust easily. You shouldn't. I'm not ready to call you anything other than Julian. He nodded, and there was no flicker of disappointment in his eyes, only respect. Then Julian is what I'll be. There was something powerful about the honesty between them now. No illusions. No performance. Just two people facing the long, slow work of rebuilding something neither had ever known how to build. After the ceremony, they walked side by side through the building's newly finished hallways. One wing had been designed specifically for single mothers, offering medical care, job training, and support programs. Another was a literacy center. A garden in the back had been planted by neighborhood volunteers, now bursting with spring's earliest blooms. It's what she wanted, Lena said softly, watching a little boy press his face to the glass of the children's library. Julian smiled faintly. It's what she deserved. They stopped in a quiet room near the end of the hallway, an office not yet occupied, furnished simply, with a desk, a couch, and a window that overlooked the playground. This is yours, he said. If you want it. The foundation needs a director here. Someone who understands the mission. Someone who understands her. Lena stepped into the room, running her hand along the edge of the desk. Her entire life, she had worked jobs that never allowed her to sit still long enough to dream. Now, for the first time, there was space. Are you offering me a job because you feel guilty? She asked, not accusing, just honest. Julian shook his head. I'm offering you a key to something your mother built in her heart long before we put it in concrete. You can say no. You can walk away, and I'll still be here, on the sidelines, in whatever capacity you'll allow. But if there's even a part of you that wants to take what she gave you and turn it into something more, this is the place. Lena looked out the window. A little girl laughed as she kicked a red ball across the fresh grass. Her mother clapped from the bench nearby. I think she'd want me to stay, Lena said. Weeks passed. Spring deepened. The center grew busy. And so did Lena. She found herself doing things she never imagined, writing grants, building outreach programs, managing volunteers. Every day she walked through the lobby, she passed her mother's photo. And instead of feeling like a daughter abandoned, she began to feel like a woman stepping into something her mother had quietly prepared her for all her life. Julian never pushed. He visited sometimes, dropped off coffee or updates on foundation work. Sometimes they talked in her office. Sometimes they just sat. One rainy afternoon, he brought her a newspaper clipping. "You were quoted," he said. "Front page of the Metro section." Lena read the article. A quote from her interview stood out: "We're not here to erase the past. We're here to give it a voice. A home. A future." She looked up at Julian, who was watching her quietly. "You're changing things," he said. "So are you." They never spoke of forgiveness directly. Not in the way people often think it should be said, with grand apologies and cinematic closure. Instead, forgiveness came slowly, like dusk turning into night. It showed itself in the steadiness of his presence, in the way he waited for her to lead. It surfaced in moments when they laughed, awkward, unsteady, but real. And it lived in the space where anger began to give way to understanding. One evening, Lena returned to the diner, now lovingly restored and renamed Isabel's Place. The walls had been repainted, the booths reupholstered, the menu revived with recipes her mother once jotted down in a battered notebook. It wasn't just a business. It was a living memorial. She stood behind the counter, wearing a new apron embroidered with the name in gold thread. A steady hum of conversation filled the space: families, students, older couples who remembered when the place first opened decades ago. There was warmth now, not weariness. Hope, not hardship. The bell above the door jingled. Julian walked in. He looked around, letting the atmosphere settle around him, then smiled at her. "Coffee?" she asked. "Always." As she poured him a cup, he reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. She froze for a second. But then, she watched him open it and slide a new photo into place, one of the two of them standing outside the community center, with Isabel's name carved in stone above them. He looked up. "Thought it was time to update my most valuable possession." She nodded slowly, her eyes glinting. Outside, the street lights flickered on, casting long, soft shadows across the sidewalk. Inside, the jukebox played something gentle, something familiar, a tune Lena remembered from childhood but never fully understood. Until now. And as she stood there, behind the counter of a place reborn, at the edge of a life rediscovered, she finally understood what her mother had meant by those three engraved words. Forgive. Love. Begin. And this was only the beginning. Every story has a beginning. But not every beginning starts with clarity, and not every ending wraps itself neatly. Some stories, like Lena Carter's, are born from silence. From unanswered questions and invisible wounds passed down like heirlooms. What began with a late-night diner shift, an exhausted waitress, and a chance encounter with a stranger carrying a familiar photograph would unravel into one of the most powerful truths Lena had ever known. At the heart of this story is Lena, a young woman weathered not by failure, but by constant survival. Her life was built on tight budgets and tougher choices. Her mother, Isabel Carter, had raised her alone, never once complaining, never once revealing the full truth about the past she had left behind. Lena grew up without a father, but more than that, she grew up with a void no explanation could fill. And so she filled it with grit, with kindness, with the quiet resilience of someone who had learned early on that life rarely gives you what it owes. But then one evening, fate walked into her life wearing a tailored suit and carrying a black leather wallet. Julian Blackwood was not the kind of man who belonged in a small, forgotten diner. His presence alone felt like it had been pulled from a different world, clean, powerful, untouchable. And yet, when his wallet fell open, exposing a photo Lena knew by heart, their two worlds collided in an instant. That one image, of Isabel, frozen in time, was more than coincidence. It was a reckoning. And from that moment, Lena was no longer just a waitress struggling to survive. She was a woman with a mystery to solve, a past to confront, and a voice to reclaim. What followed was a journey that forced her to confront everything she thought she knew about her mother, and everything she never knew about her father. Julian, for all his wealth and power, was a man haunted by regret. Years ago, he had loved Isabel. They had shared something rare, something real, something that could have lasted a lifetime. But Julian had made a choice. He had listened to fear, to ambition, to the cold expectations of a family legacy that didn't tolerate deviation. He had walked away from the woman he loved and, unknowingly, from the child they had created together. By the time he realized what he had lost, Isabel was gone. She had disappeared with dignity, raising Lena alone, never asking for help, never reopening the door to a man who had closed it first. And Lena? She had grown up without the truth, not out of cruelty, but out of protection. Isabel didn't want her daughter to carry the burden of abandonment. She didn't want Lena to believe she was someone's mistake. So she raised her in the light of quiet strength, shielding her from a world that had once broken her. But truth has a way of surfacing. And when it did, it shook both Lena and Julian to their core. The revelation that Julian was Lena's father didn't bring closure, not right away. It brought chaos. Pain. Confusion. The road to reconciliation was anything but easy. There were no shortcuts, no guarantees. Only a willingness to show up, day after day, and to face the truth without flinching. Julian didn't try to buy Lena's love. He didn't try to fix the past with money. Instead, he gave her something far more difficult, his vulnerability. He allowed her to see the man behind the name, the man who had made the wrong choices and lived with their consequences. And Lena, with a heart stronger than she knew, chose not to turn away. Together, they revisited the past. A small cabin in Lake Geneva held memories that had long been buried. There, among letters and forgotten photographs, Lena discovered a version of her mother she had never met, a passionate woman who once dared to love boldly. And in that space, father and daughter found something rare, clarity. Not perfect understanding, not instant healing, but clarity. The beginning of an honest relationship built not on fantasy, but on truth. In time, that truth gave birth to legacy. The Isabel Carter Community Center rose from the concrete of forgotten streets as a symbol of everything Isabel had stood for. Compassion. Strength. Humility. And Lena, now the center's director, stepped into her mother's dream, giving it life, purpose, and permanence. No longer just a daughter searching for answers, she became a woman shaping her own future, while honoring the legacy of the woman who had shaped hers. Julian didn't ask to be called Dad. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply showed up, again and again, and let his actions speak louder than his words. Over time, Lena allowed him in, not because the past had been erased, but because the future had room for something more. Something new. And so, the story that began in a diner didn't end with a final confrontation. It evolved. Slowly. Beautifully. Quietly. Because healing isn't loud. It's not always a grand gesture or a single moment of closure. Sometimes, it's two people sitting in silence, acknowledging the weight of everything unsaid. Sometimes, it's a necklace passed down with words like, forgive. Love. Begin. And sometimes, it's as simple as pouring someone a cup of coffee in a place you rebuilt together, one smile at a time. This was Lena's story. A story of what happens when truth breaks the surface. A story of a woman who refused to be defined by what was missing. A story of a man who had everything, but still longed for what he had once abandoned. And, ultimately, a story of what can be created when love is given a second chance, even after the silence. The life lesson. The most powerful lesson we can take from Lena and Julian's story is this. Healing takes courage, and it begins with facing the truth. We all carry pieces of our past that remain unspoken, relationships that ended in silence, family secrets that were never explained, regrets that linger just beneath the surface. But we are not defined by what hurt us. We are defined by what we choose to do with that hurt. Lena could have shut the door the moment Julian walked away from that diner. She could have let anger consume her. But instead, she followed the thread of truth, no matter how painful it was to pull. She asked the hard questions. She listened. She confronted the silence. And in doing so, she gave herself the chance to rewrite her story, not erase it, but evolve from it. Julian, for all his mistakes, chose to stop running. He chose to be accountable. He didn't try to rewrite history, he honored it. And that humility, that willingness to show up broken but honest, was the first step toward reconciliation. In our own lives, there are people we've lost. There are words we've never said. There are truths we've been afraid to confront. But if this story teaches us anything, it's that the door to healing is never entirely closed. Sometimes, all it takes is one question, brave, honest, unrelenting, to unlock a new beginning. How can we apply this in our lives today? Start the conversation. If there's someone you've drifted from, or someone whose silence weighs on you, reach out. One message can change everything. Embrace the discomfort. Healing isn't comfortable, but it is necessary. Don't run from it. Sit in it. Learn from it. Forgive, when and if you're ready. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace over bitterness. It's a gift you give yourself. Honor your past, but don't let it define your future. Your story is still being written. You get to choose how it continues. Lead with love, even when it hurts. Because love that endures is love that chooses to stay, especially when staying is hard. And finally, if this story moved you, if Lena's journey stirred something inside you, then know this: stories like these are why we do what we do. Real, raw, emotional narratives that speak to the soul. To help us continue creating meaningful content that inspires, heals, and connects us across experiences, please subscribe to our channel. Your support is what fuels the next story. The next voice. The next chance to feel seen. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. And remember, no matter where you come from, or what's been left unsaid, it's never too late to forgive, to love, and to begin.